jeg har en hjemme, men jeg har ikke forstått alt. Men jeg kan si...
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that when I was 15, 16, I went to a British boarding school in Kenya, since my parents...
Jeg har ikke forstått alt, men jeg kan si... Jeg har forstått som jeg...
Då ska du gå ut.
My name is Steinar Desen, and I work in humanitarian mine action. And that means I work in a profession where we clear landmines. I have many in the sector of mine action have a military background, and I have spent 9 years in the Norwegian Army. I'm a engineer officer from the Norwegian Army. And that was from 1989 to 1998. But in 1992, the Norwegian government wanted to engage in mine action, and they asked the big Norwegian NGOs if there was anyone who wanted to start with mine clearance. And this organization called Norwegian People's Aid volunteered. But of course, Norwegian People's Aid had no experience in clearing landmines. So they had to turn to the Norwegian Army to get help. So both in 1992 and in particular 1993, a lot of Norwegian officers went out and worked for Norwegian People's Aid to help them establish their capacity. So I was very fortunate to be allowed to go to Mozambique in 1993 to help set up the NPA mine action program in Mozambique in 1993. Spent 8 months there, and then I went back to the Norwegian Army. And then in 1998, I rejoined Norwegian People's Aid full-time, and I have been more or less working for Norwegian People's Aid since 1998. And then now, for the last 6 to 8 months, I've been consultant, independent consultant. I think it's important to mention that when I was 15, 16, I went to a British boarding school in Kenya, since my parents were working in Kenya. And I think those 2 years in Kenya opened my eyes for international work. I met new culture, met a lot of very interesting people. So I think already at that time I decided that I would like to explore a career that could take me abroad, and particularly to Africa. The fight against anti-personnel mines is important. First of all, anti-personnel mine kills primarily civilians. Every year, thousands of people are killed from landmines. And people are killed not only during war, but what is more disturbing, they are killed long after the war. People are still killed from mines coming back to the Second World War, are still killing people. And if you look throughout the world, approximately 80% of the people killed from explosive weapons are civilians, innocent civilians. So the fight to ban anti-landmines has been extremely important. It doesn't only kill and maim a lot of people, it hinders people from returning home, because mines are planted on roads, mines are planted in houses, mines are planted on agricultural land. So it hinders development, it hinders people from returning back to normal after a conflict. In the army, we as engineer officers, we learn to lay mines and we learn to clear mines. So in the army, I've been teaching others how to clear and lay mines. And in my early days in Norwegian People's Aid, I trained deminers. But NPA would always have a focus on recruiting local staff, very often we train and recruit demobilized soldiers. So they are the ones doing the demining, while we will be typically supervising and leading the operations. The deminer, he has this very challenging and dangerous responsibility of finding the anti-personnel mines. And he has a number of tools that he can use depending on the type of mines that he expects to find. In some countries we will have mines with no metal in them, and if they have no metal in them, you cannot use metal detectors, so then you actually physically have to sit and dig with a spade. It's extremely slow. Normal working day for a deminer, then it can be down to 1 to 5 square meter per day. It's a very slowly and very dangerous work to be digging for the mines. If we know that the mines contain metal, then we can use what we call the metal detector. It's a bit faster, you can sweep over the ground, and you will typically be doing between 15 and 30 square meters a day, so it's significantly faster than manual demining with the spade. In some countries we use dogs, mine detection dogs. The dogs have dogs or rats. Both of them have very good nose, so they can smell the explosives in the mines. So in some countries we have the deminers supported with dogs, and then they can suddenly start to clear maybe up to 300 to 600 square meters per day with the support of dogs. And also in some programs we have big machines, and if you have these very expensive machines, we can clear maybe up to 10,000 square meters a day. So we have a number of tools, but ultimately it's down to the individual deminers to actually find the mines and pick them up and carefully destroy them without setting them off. There's a number of qualities that we look for when we recruit deminers, because to be a deminer is hard labor. You are out more or less cultivating the ground. You are cutting the vegetation, you are digging in the ground. It's a physical hard work, so you have to be physically fit to be a deminer. It's also very important to have the ability to follow orders. You have to follow procedures. It's a very important skill, and then you have to be thorough. In mine action, you don't do mistakes. If you do, you only do mistakes once when it comes to mine action. And that's why we find men is good because they are strong, but sometimes women are better because they are more thorough. They tend to follow orders more than men. Men seems to be a bit more sloppy. They want to take shortcuts. And in mine action, you cannot take shortcuts. It's still a privilege to come back to a country, to come back to a village that you went there first time during the war or just after the war. It was totally in ruin. Everything was broken, no one living there. And then through the actions that we do, through clearance of landmines, people come back. You see people rebuilding their houses. You see people are optimistic about their future. And I still think that is fantastic to be allowed to be part, to take part in that process. If you want to start to work as a deminer or a mine clearance expert, I guess the easiest is to join the Norwegian Army. But we need, in every field, we need skilled people. So if you are good on computers, we need people who are experts on computers. If you're good on media, we need people on media as well. So I think if you have a passion and you are willing to take an education, becoming an expert within your field, there will be opportunities. And of course, if you're good on languages, languages is a key. If you can speak a different language, if you speak Arabic, French, Spanish, then it will open up a lot of opportunities. So that's on the technical operational side, but we also want to see young people engage on the advocacy side. You know, we managed to have a campaign that banned the use of anti-personnel mines. And that ban came through the involvement of civil society, young people walking in the streets and saying that anti-personnel mines are inhuman, we need to ban them. So I would suggest young people join an organization like Norwegian People's Aid or the Red Cross. We need young people who are ready to raise their voice and to engage. I think it's very important that young people do volunteer work, helping others, engage politically or in other ways. The most important is that you engage and use your skills, because everyone has skills. It's just a matter of identifying them and then using it for the better good.
You were born in Pakistan, and you came to this country at a young age. Would you like to tell us how old you are and how was your experience?
Yeah, I was born in Pakistan, in Lahore. It's a very big city. And I came to Norway in 1979, and I came directly to the University of Oslo. And it was very funny experience first time I came, and it was silence. I mean, that silence which struck me in Norway, because in my city in Lahore, life was really buzzing all the time, and there were so many people, and here there were so few people. But it has been a very wonderful experience, and I came to study and I stayed here. Situation in Pakistan was quite complicated, both politically and otherwise. So I had to I decided that it's a time to leave the country for higher education and to explore other things. And Norway was a natural choice because I have an older brother who lives here. And so that's how I had some friends also from my city who were living here. So that's how I applied at the university and I got in. My first experience in Norway was that people were pretty reserved, but friendly and nice. I mean, but at the university, there were some kind of, we experienced some kind of discrimination against foreign students. Then we also realized that in 1975, Norway had immigration ban, and after immigration ban, there was lots of discrimination of people from Asia, Africa, South America. People from Asia, like Pakistan, they came mostly as workers, and they were cheap labor Norway needed, so they were in a way working in factories and all. So there was a student movement which I got also involved in. There were anti-racist groups which I then joined because I thought that coming from Pakistan, where I have been fighting for the rights of women, against class society, against all the injustice which Pakistan had, I was struggling against that. Yeah. And then I realized that I cannot accept the same kind of injustice, here. So I have to get engaged, and that's how I got engaged into anti-racist work and also work for women's rights. When you are working for human rights in a society which think that it has no human right problems, there are challenges all the way. I mean, like in Pakistan, I knew, and everyone else around me also knew, that we are living in a very class society. We are living in a society where women are oppressed, and we have to do something. But in Norway, it's like Norwegian society. People have been brought up to think that human rights are not violated, that we have gender equality, that we have so many formal rights, and it's true as well that Norway has come very far when it comes to formal rights or equal rights. But the thing is that we are not living in a utopian society. So when my biggest challenge in the beginning was, especially working with the women's rights and women's rights organization, that to educate them that this gender equality laws which we have in Norway, they are not directly applicable to the minority women, because women with minority background are discriminated not only because of gender but also because of their background, their color of skin, the way they dress, the language they speak. So it's a kind of multiple discrimination which we have to deal. So this was my biggest challenge, to convince the women's movement here that these challenges have to be addressed if we want equality for all women. Mira Center is you can see a work of many women. Mira Center is a work of many young girls. It's a result of minority women's effort to change their stereotype images, to change their status, to change the norm of who is a woman with full rights and who is a woman with less rights. So Mira Center is a product of many minority women's efforts. I am lucky that I have the opportunity to front this organization and to be a part of this organization from the very beginning. There are many hopes. There are many things I want in life, and but my greatest hope is that we somehow can stop that development which is happening now in Norway and in other parts of Europe and Scandinavia, and that is that societies are moving towards a much more conservative anti-immigrant sentiment. And there are lots of political parties who are coming into power, who are against gender equality, who are against immigrants, who are against migrants and refugees, and they are in a way polarizing society into, we and them. And so my greatest hope is that we all get together and work in a way that we can stop that development, that we can work for societies which are more humane and which are more open, and where we have the access to all kind of rights. I think young people are very much engaged, and I'm so happy about that, because in my time we didn't have social medias, we didn't have many of the things which young people have today. So I see young people participating in debates, in creating movements, and they're doing lots of work, but they're doing differently than my generation did, because their problems are also different in some sense than my generation's problem. So I think that young people are very much engaged, but I hope that young girls with minority background also get more involved, because we don't have that luxury not to be involved. Because we have to struggle for our rights on many different levels. So we have to. we have to engage in all those levels. But I'm very happy that they are very involved and they're creating something beautiful. And in that sense, I think if you see young girls with minority background and ethnic Norwegian girls, they are working together. And this is also very nice because I think the young people who are growing up in our society, they are more like they see diversity from the day they open their eyes, and they go to the same schools, they go to the same free times activities, they have many things in common. So I'm very positive that they will create that diverse society which we have a vision one day. So they are absolutely our future. I think young people must never accept somebody else telling them that they are not capable of doing something. They must always follow their own vision, they must always follow their own intuition, and they must have bigger visions, because we are living in a global world. They have the whole globe to conquer, and it is for them. So young people have the opportunity, and they must fight for those opportunities. They should not accept less.
One of those hangers. My name is Gunnar Isaksen, and I'm almost 76 years old, and I work here at Operation V, as a volunteer, and I like it very much because here we have a place to go to, and we are a lot of people together, men together, and we have a good tone as in between, and we also do a lot of good work for others. Operation V, and it's a non-profit firm, and we are making bags with wood for family who needs them, and they get 6 sacks before Christmas and 6 after each year. It started 49.5 years ago, and then the older people in Oslo was rather poor, and there are some people who wanted to have money to get firewood, and then they saw in a construction site there was a lot of wood who was used for the building, and they get big stacks on fire, and then they collected together, and then the organization was started. It started with the social pages in the newspaper Aftenposten, and after the first giving away, then they made an interim border, and this has gone on for all those 50 years. Impossible to use the axe, then we use this one. You see here. And now we can use the axe to take the rest. My motivation was I wanted to do something after I had my pension, was retired, and I couldn't sit still, so I knew about this organization, and then I just put myself volunteer, and they said, no, you can't come today because we have too many men. And then I find a man who I knew from before, and he said, come tomorrow. And that's 6.5 years ago. We are almost 30 people, and you don't have to come here every day, but and you don't have to tell what you are going, because you are free and you are volunteers, so you can come and go if you like to. We are about 10 people, I think, who are almost every day, and the rest, 20 rest, are 4 and 2, 2 and 4. We have, we call it sack or bag. Here, and Yes. We are giving firewood out to 800 people, and it's about 8,000 sacks together, altogether. So it's a lot of firewood going out. We have some lists, and every night we call to people if it's okay to deliver at your home tomorrow night, and if they say yes, they get it. Because some benefit from the community is single mothers who don't have work, non-employed people, and also people who has sickness before they are 62. So, and all the people who has retired from anything, they are free to get, and they have to call us, and then we are giving them firewood. It's about 400 bags here, and it's made ready for the next season. The best thing is to keep in shape. you can do it a lot of ways, but I think you don't think the gym is nothing for me, and sitting looking at telly is nothing for me at all. But here I can be in shape, and I think if you get old enough, you will feel happy to be doing something. It's not like my oldest son. He's 52, and he says, when I'm going to get retired, I shall do nothing, nothing at all. But it's not like his father. Start with, du skal ha dem i størrelse mellom her. Så da tar jeg gjerne, hvis det ikke er kvist, tar du sånn og sånn. Kan du prøve å ta der og der for eksempel, eller noe sånt.
Thank you for having us here.
I'm very glad you are here.
Yes,
and you got some interesting questions for me, I think.
I do. Should we just go right into it?
Yeah, just go ahead.
So, can you tell us where you were born and where you grew up?
I was born in Oslo, and I grew up on the east side of the city, which is basically the working class city. There's a very big difference in Oslo between east and west.
So what type of teenager were you?
What kind of teenager?
Yes, if you can...
Oh, I was a radical teenager. I was an oppositional teenager.
Okay.
I think I've always been sort of asking questions, even when I didn't have a clue about the subjects that were discussed. I would easily sort of go in and say, "What do you mean by that?"
You were always curious.
Well, curious, but I think many times I was also oppositional. I think I was committed to making a difference. And you know, in my life, there was a big change. I went to South Africa in 1987. And I came to South Africa, it was apartheid, and I saw the difference between the various groups and how they were treated, and the legal structure and the institutional structure and the discrimination. To move into a country like that, and to see how powerful civil society was, I met up with the African trade union movement, COSATU, very early. So I linked up with them and did work with them, and ended up finding some of my best friends there, and it became, and I was part and parcel of a lot of the political anti-apartheid work from inside South Africa. And I was still in my 20s when I came there. And that changed much of my life afterwards. Partly because of the shock of seeing South Africa and the discrimination and how everything worked. So that taught me the value of fighting for justice. And even more importantly, to work with the unions in South Africa and see how much could be done if we did it, if we had a plan, we organized properly. And I went away from my first stay in South Africa. I stayed there 3-4 years the first time. And I went away with the knowledge that if you make a plan and you organize things properly, there is no limit as to what one can achieve. I learned a lot from the Norwegian People's Aid, from the NPA. I met some fantastic people. I was the boss of 2,500 people doing programs in 40 countries. I went to a lot of conflict zones. I met some people and saw some things that made a deep impact. I think the most powerful and important thing that I learned, or the two things, was that one was that the world is so much smaller than what we often think, and there are so many similarities between various parts of the world, and that people are people all over.
True.
If you sit down and talk properly to people and you listen properly to what they are saying, it should be very easy to lay down weapons and actually create peace. Very often people think that when they talk to people from other cultures, they have to seek common ground or understanding, or agreement is a better word. I have always found that it's very easy when I'm traveling, talking to people, to also have disagreements.
True.
To be open and clear about, well, you've got a good point on that, which you are saying now, but I disagree with you in what you are saying there. People understand that. And it's always easy to have discussions, and if you do things in a proper way, if you show people respect, you listen to them, and you still say, but I disagree with what you are saying. Disagreements are fine.
They're part of learning.
They're part of learning, but they're also part of democracy. So we don't always have to agree on everything, but we have to listen to each other.
True.
I've met a lot of extraordinary people. I've met Peace Prize laureates, international leaders that have impressed me. I've been very impressed with all the Peace Prize laureates, actually. You know, it's easy to always to give most attention to those that have got most media coverage, or those that win the peace prizes, or to the world leaders. But I've actually also met a lot of people on the ground, ordinary people, that have got far less power at point of departure. They don't have the attention of the media. They don't have the same resources. They don't have the same access to power. But a lot of them are doing extraordinary things. What worries me most is that sometimes people accept some radicalization or some cuts in tolerance, and sometimes I see that things are shifting slowly by slowly. So we accept a little bit more ugly language, and we accept a little bit of intolerance, and we accept a little bit of discrimination. And my big fear is that, you know, wars don't come usually like this.
Yes.
They come by intolerance growing, by understanding disappearing, step by step, slowly.
Today you are working to promote peace in the world. Where do you find your motivations for advancing this cause?
We don't have a choice. I've seen the costs of war. And I think, you know, sometimes I meet people who think it's much more fun with war and war sounds more interesting, and, you know, they make war games on the internet. No one makes peace games on the internet. And it's like this fascination of defense and war and armies, and peace is actually more fun. Peace means drinking wine in the sunset and having conversations and interesting political dialogues and having children and having fun jobs and having, yeah. So I don't read poems to get motivation for peace. I have seen the costs of war. That's where my motivation is. I often tell people, and especially youth, that there are very few things you can achieve on your own. And if you try and go to parliament to get meetings with parliamentarians, they usually will not have time. But if you come with 500 students behind you, or you represent the whole school, or you have thousands of members, or you have written a powerful article in the newspaper so that thousands of people have read, so they know you can do it again, then they will open the door. You know, a lot of people are complaining about things all the time. Stop complaining, do something about it.
You know?
I mean, life is too short to complain.
To gutter og en jente, og så det 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 av mine 6 barnebarn. Ja, så hennes lillebror ikke med på dette bildet.
Jeg så han der.
Ja. Etter folkemordet. Thank you.
All right. Hello, Mr. Erwin Pong.
Hi.
You were born in Hungary. Can you tell us what brought you to Norway?
Yes. I was born in Hungary in 1955, so I'm going on 64, and in 1955 Hungary was ruled by the communists, okay? Yeah. So it was a communist country, and I was born 10 years after the war. Okay. My parents are ethnic Hungarian, but raised in a small town called Sziget, or small town called Sziget in Romania. It's an ethnic Hungarian area, and I am a child of 2 Holocaust survivors. So my mother survived 3 death camps, Auschwitz, Birkenau, and Buchenwald. Bergen-Belsen. And my father is the only survivor of 13 children, the youngest of 13, and the only one who survived the Holocaust. So they met in 1945 after the war, and they married, and they waited 10 years before I was born. Yeah. So they tried to escape in 1956, but then in 1956 the borders closed. So they were shipped back to Budapest, where I was born. And then we were able to get out of Hungary in 1960. So we came to Norway in 1960 because my dad got a job here as a cantor at the Jewish community in Oslo.
I see. Well, what did you bring to this country where you chose to live?
That's a very, very interesting question. What did I bring to this country? You know, the Jews have been a minority in Europe for 2,000 years. So we brought to this country our minority competence. So I used to say jokingly that the Jews here are the only professional minority. Which means that we have a minority competence that other minorities in Norway don't have.
Yeah.
Because why? Because all of them came from countries where they were a majority. When we come to a new country, we sense instantaneously the answer to these questions. So one of our abilities as a professional minority is knowing what to do in order to be integrated quickly.
Well, can you tell us about your commitment to defend the rights of minorities?
Yes, I do that by combating xenophobia, by combating racism, by combating anti-Semitism, anti-Tsiganism. Until 2013, we had an action plan. The government had an action plan against racism. And since 2013, we haven't had that until last year, or this year actually. At the end of this year, the government will present a new action plan against racism. And to achieve this, we've been working steadily for many years. Since I started here 6 years ago, this has been one of the major tasks and objectives. So last year, the Parliament asked the government unanimously to come forth with a new action plan against racism. So that's an achievement, and that is gratifying in our work, that we see that it's possible to influence politicians and going in the right direction. And I'm not so afraid of small steps as long as the steps go in the right direction. Yeah, my personal ambitions is that we will have a society that is a pluralistic society, not a tolerant society, but a pluralistic society. So when tolerance is actually not so positive. I mean, being tolerant is not so positive. Why? Because tolerance says that I accept your differences. I don't like them, but I accept them. I can live with them. As the pluralist says, I have to see what's positive and valuable in your value system. So this means I have to know you, and I have to learn and know your value system in order to see the value in it. Yeah. So it's more ambitious to become a pluralistic society than to become a tolerant society. So more interaction.
You said something about teaching generations. Do you think that young people are sufficiently engaged today?
No. And we have evidence of that. So, for instance, the turnout to the polls in the lower age groups are too low. So I taught three classes, videregående classes, at the National Theatre last year and the year before, and there were like 40 students pupils at the time, and I asked them in the beginning. It was a democracy thing. In the beginning, who were interested in politics? No one was interested in politics. No hands up. So what is going on here? So the thing is that they have to get engaged in politics. Why? Because everything around them is politics.
That's true.
Yes. All the parties in Norway have their own youth organizations, and it's very easy to become a member, and it's very easy to get influence. and to be counted and to be heard.
Yes.
Yes. Our democracy is actually in development and has been since 1814, since we got our constitution. Yeah. At that time, we didn't have a popular vote as we know it today. At that time, who could vote? First of all, women couldn't vote. I mean, the women couldn't vote until 1913 in Norway. So 1814, no women. Only the affluent, those who had money or property, and those who were educated and had official positions. Yeah. So the common man did not have the vote. No. And then we got general voting rights, general when not under the age of 25.
Oh, that's how it was?
Yes, and then it was lowered to 21, and then it was lowered to 18, so we're in a process. So my suggestions to them, why not 16, at least in the county elections, not maybe in the parliamentary elections, but in the local elections. Yeah. Democracy is not a given. As I said, it's developing every day, and it can be threatened. Liberal democracies today are threatened by polarization, and the problem today is that most of our population, 85% of the Norwegian population today, is born after the war. And when I'm talking about the war, I'm talking about the Second World War. They are born after the war. So they don't know any other society than the liberal democracy. Even though it's changing, it was a liberal democracy at the time they were born, and it still is. So they don't acknowledge the fact that you have to defend it, that it might be threatened. Yeah, so this is part of my job today, is to be a wake-up call for people, to see that Bannon is one of those guys who threaten our liberal democracy. Yeah.
So first question is, can you tell us where you were born and where you grew up?
Okay. I was born in the south of India, in a place in a city that's called Chennai today, but at that time when I was born, it was called Madras. I grew up in that city till I left India to come here to Norway.
What were your first impressions when arriving in Norway?
That's interesting. I thought that the place was very beautiful, but terribly cold. Yes. And I have, before that, I had never seen snow before. So that was like a shock to me. And then I also thought it was very strange. It was very quiet, because I came from a huge city that at that time in Madras there were, I think, 4 million people. And coming to Oslo, where you look around and you have to search to find people walking around at that time. Now there are, of course, many more people in Oslo. So I found the place too quiet. I thought first that maybe something had gone wrong, that there was a war or people were in hiding. So I couldn't understand it. But eventually I understood that it was, that's how it was here.
What made you want to defend women's rights?
Well, I was very interested in women's rights from when I was actually very young. I think I have a very strong sense of justice. And when I was, already when I was a child, I felt injustices towards women that were stronger than, I saw that women were less privileged and had less voice in society, and I was very annoyed with a lot of the restrictions that were given to me because I was a girl. From when I came in 1974 to 1984, I was mostly trying to study or trying to find my footing here in Norway, and also I had a child. My daughter was born in 1979, so after that I started looking for things I could actively engage in Norway. And then I saw that in the area of women's rights, the shelter movement, the crisis centers in Norway had started establishing themselves, and the crisis center in Oslo started announcing for people who want to work as volunteers. So that's the area that I started engaging myself in. I really believe that when women are subject to violence because they are women, it really impedes their progress in everything else in life. Because if you're subject to violence, either whether it's in the public, outside, but mainly at home, you are being subject to violence by people you love. And that is has a huge also psychological impact on women, and it also stops them from getting an education, going forward in life, getting a job, becoming independent, becoming strong. Violence against women today, also by the UN, is recognized as one of the biggest barriers for women going forward and achieving equality. I am, of course, happy about the progress that has been made, especially like in Norway, in the last 30 years or 35 years. But I think it's too slow, and I can't say that I'm satisfied. Because, and that's also because I think the political will is not there to bring about transformative and fundamental change.
Can you tell us about your experience for women in the Middle East?
Yeah, that is also, I think, quite complicated. Because, of course, you can't generalize about women in a country or in a region or even in a specific community. What I saw was that not only women, but also civil society organizations had very little space. They had to, if they had to have meetings that were big, they had to apply for permission to hold the meetings. Unlike in Norway, where if you want to hold a meeting, you just hold a meeting. Yeah? So I think it is very complicated to survive as civil society organizations in the Middle East. It's not easy, at least. But still, you find very strong organizations and very brave people. I am on the board of YURK, which is Free Legal's legal service for women. I think they do a lot of very, very good and important work. I am on the board of Women's Lobby, which is an umbrella organization of many women's organizations. And now recently I got into the Council of Europe's Committee on Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. And I think that is extremely exciting work, because what we do is we monitor a convention, a European Convention on Domestic Violence and Violence Against Women. And so we go into different countries in Europe, studying the situation for women and their subject or their exposure to violence.
What is your job currently?
My job currently is here in this institution. It's the Office of the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Ombud. And my position is Policy Director, and my special area of work is also domestic violence. So that's what I've been working with for now almost 40 years. So.
What makes you very angry about your work and what makes you very happy?
Yeah, what makes me angry really, maybe not you, yes, angry, is that the slow progress. But we all know things take time, especially if you want to change society and societal thinking and the way people respond to injustices. It takes time. It takes time to bring about new laws. It takes time to make changes in law. So all this takes time, and sometimes it's very, very, very frustrating, and it does make me angry. What has been achieved does, of course, make me happy, because like 40 years ago, if women were subject to violence, they just kept quiet. They had to keep quiet because there was nothing else to do, and they had to just accept what was happening to them. But now there are a large number of services available. The notion that we have achieved equality is in itself a barrier to achieving equality, because that's what a lot of us think now, that yeah, in a way everybody's equal, so we don't have to fight for equality anymore. And that in itself is a hindrance, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So because also so most of the debates discussions are brought down to the level of the individual, and then it's assumed that if people are not equal, it's because of something they have not done themselves to become equal. You don't get the opportunity to see that, okay, society has structures that are already inbuilt, that produce inequality. There are still laws that discriminate against men and women. Civil society organizations are the backbone of democracies, of good democracies. And for the development of equal and democratic societies, every society needs the voice of civil society organizations and civil society, because they are the ones who can be critical to the establishment, to the governments, to the people in power. And so how can you get your voice heard if you do not engage yourself in this? So my advice, I don't know what my advice is, how they can get involved, but my advice to young people is that they must get involved.